Good evening, folks. It's Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Magnetic Reversal News, bringing you a magnetic excursion update Tuesday, October 8th, around 9:15 p.m. Mountain Time 2024. An X-flare happening now as we record the video, and we've got a lot of space weather to talk about. But the big story is historic Cat 5 Hurricane Milton, now leaving Cancun and headed towards Tampa. Keep calm. It's boom time. Lee County officials urge those in evacuation zones to leave by tonight. Milton is still on track to bring storm surge, and it looks like it's moving a little slower than initially forecast, and landfall will be late tomorrow night around midnight for the eye wall, maybe even into Thursday morning. We'll know more in the morning. But evacuation doesn't mean you've got to fly to Istanbul or drive to Georgia. It means simply if you're in an evacuation zone, drive 10 or 20 miles inland, find a shelter, or stay with a friend. This will guarantee that you won't die with 10 to 15 foot of storm surge as your home is underwater. So heed the warnings. And if you can, move inland. They're now supplying buses for those that can't afford it to bus you to these shelters. So there is help, and you still have time to evacuate. Hurricane Milton remains a Cat 5 storms as models push it slightly south. We'll get to those in a moment. They look actually exactly the same as yesterday, but I do digress. Tampa Bay hasn't been hit directly by a major hurricane since 1921, and so no one there. That's 103 years ago. No one there remembers any of that. And it's a memory. And another memory will be made. And in 100 years, no one in Tampa will remember. DeSantis says Milton is likely the largest National Guard mobilization in advance of the storm in Florida history. This guy knows what he's doing. The people out in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, those officials really didn't have things in place. Take a look at what Governor DeSantis has in place here for the hurricane coming up. The governor said 5,000 National Guard members will jump to 8,000 in the next few days. Also helping with the storm response, 34 search and rescue aircraft, 450 tactical vehicles, 140 high wind vehicles, 10 maritime crews, 3 high water UTVs, 2 UH-60 Blackhawks, 4 drone teams, 15 cut and toss crews, 2 amphibious rescue crews, 200 Florida State Guard soldiers. And that is quite the preparedness, and they're going to need it. There are going to be hundreds of people that do not heed the warnings and put themselves in harm's way, unfortunately. This is going to be an epic storm. Will probably make landfall as a Cat 3 sometime around midnight to 2 a.m. on Thursday. Orlando, Florida, in the center of the state, will still experience full hurricane force winds, 100 to 120 mile an hour gusts, and flash flooding and epic flooding rainfall potential of 8 to 12 inches. The worst conditions for Orlando and Disneyland will be 10 a.m. Wednesday through 8 a.m. Thursday. I think that it might be a little later than that and last through the afternoon on Thursday, to be quite honest. Here are the current hurricane warnings and watches for the state, all the way down to Naples, Florida, all the way up to Cedar Key in those hurricane warnings. We also have the potential for huge amounts of rain in other areas, not just Orlando. Let's take a look here over on the AccuWeather Twitter, and you can get live updates there. Tampa, the highest winds expected 120 to 140 miles per hour, 8 to 12 inches of rain. Storm surge 10 to 15 feet. This is life-threatening and no joke. This storm surge may rush inland as far as a mile or more in some areas. If you're in evacuation zone A or B, don't dawdle. Get out now. The worst conditions will be Wednesday morning through Thursday at landfall, 2 a.m., And we're going to have several high tides as the storm approaches. Take a look at Fort Myers. They're not out of the woods, even though they're far south of where this baby's going to make landfall. They're, in fact, on the worst side. The south side of the storm is where all the driving winds are going to bring in this historic storm surge to western Florida, and it will be historic indeed. There is going to be hundreds of miles of the western coast under 10 feet of water. That could be the largest disaster ever known when we finally get the final numbers. Fort Myers could see 60 to 80 mile per hour gusts, 4 to 8 inches of rain, and 6 to 10 feet of storm surge. The worst conditions will be 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. Wednesday and Thursday. This is no joke, folks. Heed the warnings. And let's take a look at what the current Advisory 15A maximum sustained winds at 165 miles per hour, solid Cat 5 territory. This should increase in strength overnight and into the morning. It'll still be Cat 5, but winds at that point might be at 185 miles per hour. And then all day tomorrow, it will weaken as it makes its final approach to Tampa Bay. Let's take a look at the key message for Milton as of 4 p.m. Central Time, October 8th. A large area of destructive storm surge with high inundations of 10 feet or greater is expected along portions of the west central coast of the Florida Peninsula. If you are in the storm surge warning area, this is an extremely life-threatening situation. Do not dawdle and evacuate now. You should evacuate today if ordered by officials. There will likely not be enough time to wait to leave on Wednesday, unless you get on one of those buses and move to one of those shelters. Let's take a look at the peak surge so you know what we're talking about, a huge swath. If you are from Chassahowitzka down through the Anclote River, you need to evacuate. If you are from the Anclote all the way south to Englewood, you're dead if you stay. From Englewood south to Bonita, it's questionable until we see where landfall is, but also you're probably dead if you stay in the evacuation zone. This is a major swath, hundreds of miles of shoreline, and there will be 10 feet or more of storm surge inundation south of that eye wall as those hurricane force winds push inland. And it doesn't matter if it reduces strength. What this Cat 5 is going to do as it moves towards Tampa is be building up a huge bulge of water down here in the southeastern quadrant. Even if the storm weakens, it's going to bring the Cat 5 bulge with it wherever it makes landfall. So it doesn't matter if it's going to weaken as it approaches the peninsula. It is going to bring those Cat 5 storm surges with it regardless if the wind speed decreases. Very serious storm, and don't be fooled. The Atlantic coast is also at severe risk. Once this eye moves across here, somewhere north of Canaveral, let's say, near Daytona Beach, everywhere north of there is now at threat for storm surge of 3 to 5 feet. So don't take this with a grain of salt. Atlantic coast, this is a serious storm. In fact, the most serious storm to hit Tampa in 103 years. Let's continue with the key message for Hurricane Milton. Devastating hurricane force winds are expected along portions of the west coast of Florida, where a hurricane warning is in effect. Milton is forecast to remain a hurricane as it crosses the entire Florida peninsula, and life-threatening hurricane force winds, especially in gusts, are expected to spread inland across the peninsula like we showed you. Preparations to protect life and property, including being ready for long-duration power outages, days if not weeks, should be complete by tonight. Heavy rainfall across the Florida peninsula through Thursday brings the risk of catastrophic and life-threatening flash and urban flooding, along with moderate to major river flooding, especially in areas where coastal and inland flooding combine to increase the overall flood threat. So, don't be a dummy. Get out of Dodge. A lot of the rivers in Florida are already at flood stage. That is the blue, the dark blue dots. And where this baby is going to make landfall, we've got blue, light blue, and dark blue. That is already rivers at flood stage. This is before the storm even gets there. So anywhere in the region where there's blue dots, you could see severe flooding. That's the entire state of Florida. About 80% of it east and south of that line right there. So the entire state of Florida now at threat of flooding. Even southern Florida. Take a look at this huge plume of moisture now moving its way into the southern tip of Florida there. This is still, the storm is hours away and hundreds of miles away from Florida. And look at all this moisture ahead of it. This is going to be a very bad storm with very bad results. I can't implore you all enough. If you're on the coast, you need to move inland now. Here are the current Atlantic Hurricane Milton intensity forecast, which go through landfall, and you can see all the models at landfall are between Cat 3 and a strong Cat 5. All of the models. And that landfall is going to be in about 36 hours. I think about 30 hours. Let's just say it's 36 hours. We could see anywhere from one model at Cat 2 to Cat 3, Cat 4, or Cat 5 at landfall. And here's the full forecast. Florida braces for Hurricane Milton. Hurricane Milton is forecast to make landfall along the west coast of the Florida Peninsula early Thursday morning. Destructive, potentially catastrophic storm surge, very heavy rainfall, and a few tornadoes along the west coast will begin as early as Wednesday. Please continue to monitor the National Hurricane webpage for the latest updates, as well as Oppenheimer Ranch Project. We may go live tomorrow afternoon. We will tomorrow night as the storm approaches and makes landfall. We'll have all of the breaking news, all of the live stream feeds and footage where, well, we can all witness a historic storm destroy thousands of lives. Here is the GFS model of the approaching storm on the latest 18Z. It shows a direct hit, an eye wall hit directly on the northern Tampa Bay region. This is a worst case scenario. We are all hoping that this storm slides a little south, but it doesn't matter. If it slides south, it's just going to destroy Clearwater or Sarasota or some other region. So maybe even all the way down to Fort Myers again. That entire region was destroyed a few years ago by Hurricane Ian, for goodness sakes. And everyone has rebuilt. And now it may all be destroyed once again. So pray for the people. Pray for the folks in Western Florida. The entire state of Florida is going to be affected by this in one way or another. We do have snow in the forecast. It is getting cold, folks, and it looks like some heavy precipitation through the end of October for eastern as well as western Canada. So, remember when Al Gore said it wouldn't snow anymore? Shut up, Al! Get in your hole! Al Gore gets no bunt cake tonight. Seismic update. Very low-level activity worldwide, which is good news for all of us. 4.4 in Romania, the most unique quake on the map. There is some updates here for the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. One of our viewers brought to my attention Mount Baker. Now, Mount Baker hasn't really been on the list at the Pacific Seismic Network at all. It barely rumbles. But if you look at the long-term seismicity over the last decade or so, here we are looking at the last 2 decades, you could see a marked increase in Mount Baker's seismic activity, especially up here where the magma is being emplaced. So back in 2023, it appears as if a pipe has emerged from deep in the mantle in placing magma up and into Baker. And the seismicity is getting closer and closer to the surface here, 5 kilometers and up. So we could see a small eruption at Mount Baker. Take a look at the raw data on earthquakes between 2000 and the present, and you can see since 2022 a marked and very rapid increase in seismicity. So Mount Baker could be the sleeping gem. Now, the good news is this isn't a big life-ending eruption. Mount Baker erupted, well, so many times from the end of the Dalton Minimum through 1884. It's about 65 years, and 24 eruptions popped off, VEI 2 and 3, mostly nothing life-ending or significant, but significant enough for the locals that live near Baker. Baker is officially under eruption alert. A quick look at space weather and that X-flare that just kicked off. Now, I would imagine that X-flare is coming from the departing region here, active region 3842, because that is where the last few X-flares came from. But if it emanated from 3848, we've got some potential space weather headed our way. It's just all speculation now. Let's see where the X-flare peaked out at. X 1.8. It was impulsive at best. There you're seeing the flare right there, like swimwear. Now, there is even more space weather coming off of our sun. First, we had a geomagnetic storm for the last 24 plus hours, just ended 12 hours ago. And also, we had a filament liftoff and another CME. The good news is that the filament was in the southern region here, and most of the plasma is headed directly away from Earth there. But gorgeous nonetheless. Let's move this back here so you can get some of that amazing plasma filament action there. Boom, look at all that plasma. Holy macaroni. Now, the good news is that is moving away from Earth, but the bad news is that this X-flare is headed towards us. Well, and we don't even know anything about that right now. It just happened. The solar storm yesterday produced amazing aurora as far south. Here, take a look at Pawnee National Grasslands in Colorado, for goodness sakes. These red pillars just light up the sky. Absolutely phenomenal. This is the reason such spectacular aurora with such low-level events moving down into Colorado is that our magnetosphere is weakening. And here we can see, even in over Chicago, one of the brightest cities in the U.S., you can still film. All right, we want to get rid of that or we will be demonetized. You can still see the aurora over Chi-Town. Take a look at this. And look at all these UFOs and UAPs. Can you even believe that? I'm kidding. I'm not kidding about getting demonetized, though. So the solar storm was spectacular indeed, and now we're waiting for approaching X-flare here, and we're waiting on telemetry on this to see what is going to happen in the morning. Here is ISWA Signet Streamer showing that long-duration X-flare headed towards us with a glancing blow, definitely there on the model. We'll take a quick look at the WSA Enlil spiral. Usually they wait a little longer to model the CME here, but definitely a glancing blow on the 11th, just 3 days out. So we'll see what probably G1, G2 geomagnetic storm forecast for that one. Nothing significant. The grid will hold. Let's take a look at Soho as Comet A3 is diving in deeper every single day. And look at the reaction to the sun. As soon as the comet comes into the picture, boom, boom, boom. I hope we don't have more booms. We just had the fourth boom just happen right now. As this sun traverses behind, or as this comet traverses behind the sun, it is my estimation that we're going to see a number of very large solar flares exploding from that big plasma ball in the sky. All care to the effects of this electric comet now diving in towards our sun. How much fun is that? Leave a comment below. The Arctic shipping ends early. Yeah, it's just the beginning of fall. Guess why it's ending early? Too much ice. Yeah. All the fear-mongering by the mainstream media, the fact that the Arctic is going to be ice-free and blippity-bloppity-blue over the last 2 decades couldn't be further from the truth. Arctic shipping has ended in October. That means October, November, December, January, February, and March, and maybe even to April, no shipping. You know why? Because it's below freezing up in the Arctic all winter. A lot of not so smart people have been sharing pictures like this of, well, what is it? The biggest coral reef restoration effort on the planet. And it's down in Florida. And these lowbrow, low IQ weirdos or clickbaiters are claiming that this is underwater HARP. Well, that just goes to show you how much they understand about HARP, which are atmospheric antenna, which could never operate in the water. But the fact that these coral farms look like antennas means that dumb people will make anything up. If you want to know more about the biggest coral reef restoration effort on the planet, head over to coralrestoration.org. Learn about the restoration project, the science, and the education behind it. You can learn about coral reefs in general, and you can even get involved. And those are the facts. Also, if you're a prepper or you're thinking about growing your own food, there's only one place you want to buy seeds. That's the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, a new company that is blowing up and restocking and preparing to move to their first physical location. The good news is that means huge savings to you. There's a few dozen flowers and vegetables. As they stock more, they're keeping costs low. You can still pick up heirloom, open pollinated vegetable seeds for $1 a pack, like glass gem corn, Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, red strawberry popcorn, round mauve eggplants, and more. Green striped cushaw, Carolina Reaper, on and on. We've got eggplant, we got melons, we've got tomatoes, peppermint stick celery, and even hot peppers. All $1 a pack. You buy 25 packs or more, and shipping is free. It's almost like the seeds pay for themselves. And that's a boom to knowledge. Please share this video. We are shadow banned. We need your help to grow. Just hit the share button. Sharing is caring. You can also become a Patreon, support the work we do, watch all of our podcasts in one place, commercial free. Be safe. We love you a lot. It's going to be a big day tomorrow and historic landfall. I hope everyone is getting out of harm's way or safe at this moment. Prayers and thoughts to all those in the path of Hurricane Milton.